5 o'clock. I call to order the Chesapeake Bay Board meeting for Thursday, January 9th, 2025. It is the responsibility of this board to carry out locally the Commonwealth policy to protect against and minimize pollution and deposition of sediment in wetlands, streams, and lakes in James City County, which are tributaries of the Chesapeake Bay. Roll call, Mr. Wilson?
Mr. McElroy? Mr. Waltrip?
Here.
Mr. O'Brien?
Here.
Mr. May?
Here.
Ms. Bowie?
Here. First item on our agenda for the meeting is the review of the minutes from the December 11th, 2024 regular board meeting. Is there any discussion? Could I have a motion, please?
Motion to approve the minutes as written.
Voice vote, please. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. The public comment period now will open. This offers a chance for community members to express their opinions. Topics discussed shall not be directly related to specific public hearing items. To participate, speakers must provide their name and address for the record. Would anyone wish to speak at this time? None being seen, we will move on to the public hearings. The outline for tonight's public hearings will be a staff presentation, followed by any questions or clarifications from the board. Then the public hearing will be opened. At that time, anybody wishing to speak may do so once called upon by the chair. All public speakers must state their name and address for the record. Presentations before the board are subject to time limits. After everyone wishing to speak has done so and discussion among the board has concluded, the public hearing will be closed. The first matter is CBPA 24-0177 at 2828 Starling Drive for a deck expansion and screen porch conversion.
Good evening, Vice Chair and members of the board. Amanda Frazier, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 24-0177. Mr. Mark and Ms. Martha Berry have applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the deck replacement and conversion located at 2828 Starling Drive within the Rolling Wood subdivision in the Mill Creek watershed. This parcel was platted in 1987 prior to the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 1990. Subject parcel and the Mill Creek watershed boundary. A closer look at the subject parcel and aerial view. Topography. RPA boundary. The total lot size of this property is 0.41 acres, of which 44% is located within the RPA. The applicants are proposing to replace, expand, and convert the existing deck at the rear of the home to a screen porch. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 128 square feet of increased impervious. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals half a planting unit. The applicants have provided a mitigation plan equaling half a planting unit, 1 understory tree, and 6 shrubs, therefore satisfying county mitigation requirements. So in this section, you can see the existing deck, and they are expanding it here. And this is the section that is impacting the RPA. And then they will be converting it to a screen porch. And then these are the proposed mitigation plantings. This is a photo taken home showing the existing deck from this angle. Side, and they'll just be facing it. handing it out this direction and around the side. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the deck replacement and conversion. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of a deck is accessory in nature. The board may grant exceptions to sections 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions which you have before you. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be minor for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval for this exception request, and if the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions to be incorporated into the approval. The applicants must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. The applicants must submit a surety of $500 in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plantings equaling half a planting unit, 1 understory tree, and 6 shrubs. This exception request approval will become null and void if construction has not begun by January 9th, 2026. Written requests for an extension to an exception must be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than November 26, 2025, 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
Does the expansion extend up to the retaining wall, or does it go past it? Supported by the concrete pad past it?
I'll defer that question to the applicant.
Would anyone like to speak on this matter? Please come forward. State your name and address, please.
My name is Mark Berry, and I own 20 Starling Drive, so I just was wondering if you had any questions that I could answer.
Is it gonna be counter-levered out, or is beyond the wall that I'm looking
The
at?
deck has not been designed yet. We weren't going to do that until we could get approval. So if that is a concern, we could easily relocate the wall or extend beyond it. So it's just according to the structural design of it. It has not been done yet.
Has not been done.
Mine was just a curiosity. I don't think it would impact the decision one way or the other.
Right, because there's a concrete pad on the other side of the wall.
Other question? Mr. Berry. Thank you. Discussion?
I think this seems pretty straightforward. I'd be willing to make a motion on this.
Great, thank you. We have a motion to adopt the resolution.
I would make the motion to adopt the resolution. I'm sorry, I would make a motion to adopt the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board case number CBPA-24-0177 at 2828 Starling Drive.
I will now close the public hearing, and I'll ask for a vote, please.
So the motion is to adopt. Mr. McElroy?
Aye.
Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. May?
Yes.
Ms. Bowie?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Next matter before the board is CBPA 24-0167 at 305 Millstream Way for a home addition and deck extension. Scrooging.
Vice Chair Bowie, members of the board, Emily Grosjean, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 24-0167. Mr. Kenny Brown of Total Home Improvements Incorporated has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Mr. Gerald P. Prosek for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the expansion of a deck located at 305 Millstream Way within the Settlers Mill subdivision and the Mill Creek watershed. You can see that watershed boundary outlined in yellow here and the parcel in question outlined in blue. Moving further in, this is an aerial shot of the property, and this is the proposed area of work here, along with the topography, the current RPA buffer, and the presence of natural open space or conservation easement on the property. The proposed work will not be encroaching into that area. The total lot size of this property is 0.38 acres, of which 53% is located within the RPA. The applicant is proposing to expand an existing deck by 96 square feet. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 50 square feet of administrative impacts and 96 square feet of legislative impacts for a total of 146 square feet of impacts within the RPA. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals half a planting unit or 6 shrubs. The applicant has submitted a mitigation plan equaling half a planting unit or 6 shrubs, thus satisfying mitigation requirements. As you can see here, kind of grayed out is the administrative proposed addition, along with the proposed deck that's before you in purple here. And then we have that 100-foot RPA buffer and that conservation easement. As you can see, it's completely within the landward 50. And then again, the same site plan, just with the addition of those 6 shrubs as required for mitigation. Here are some recent photographs of the site, kind of looking from the side where that existing deck is. The administratively approved addition will be coming out here to this portion of the home, with that expansion of the deck coming out this way to connect with the existing one. That's just another shot of that corner of the deck to kind of show you where it's coming out in terms of the existing yard. And then just more of an uphill shot, again, showing that corner, showing just how far out it's coming, and then a direct uphill or a direct shot from uphill to show you this current slope. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the expansion of a deck. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the expansion of a deck is considered accessory in nature. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions outlined in front of you. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be minor for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval for this exception request, and if the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project, and the applicant must submit a surety of $500 in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plan equaling a planting unit or 6 shrubs. The exception request approval will become null and void if construction is not begun by January 9th of 2026, and written requests for an extension to an exception must be submitted to the SRP division no later than November 28th, 2025, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Questions? No. Discouraging. Would anyone like to address the board? Please state your name and address, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Chesapeake Bay Local Assistance Board, my name is Donald Davis. I'm a land surveyor at Davis and Associates. We're located at 3630 George Washington Memorial Highway in Yorktown. I'm here tonight representing Total Home Improvement, who filed the application to be able to make this small addition to this deck. And I'm also here representing Mr. Jared Prosek. He's the owner of the property. Just a couple of things I'd like to say before we finish this is that the buffer restoration manual by the DCR in Richmond requires you to be able to compensate or mitigate for vegetation. The owner is requesting that and is approved to mitigate with 6 shrubs. They're in agreement with that. They're willing to provide the other requirements as far as surety for the site. And it's a very minor addition that we're making to this deck. We would ask you, since it's such a minor addition, that you approve the application. Sir.
Questions for Mr. Davis?
Excuse me?
I just was asking if the board had any questions for you. Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Please come forward.
My name is Jerry Prosek. I'm the owner of this land, and I live at 305 Millstream Way. And I just want to say I'm here to support what's going on, and I'm also here to learn the process that's happening here. And I really like my deck because my wife is expanding the kitchen and making my existing deck smaller. And I like barbecuing out in the back, but I'm a really good steward of the land. I've been living behind this pond for 24 years, 25 years. And when the weather gets bad, we don't even put salt on the driveways because it runs down into the pond and stuff like that. Now, I just wanted to show my face and thank you guys and ma'am for assisting.
Thank you, Mr. Prosick. With no further comment, I will close the public hearing and the matter is before the board. Any discussion?
Pretty much straightforward.
I would make a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board case number CBPA-24-0167 at 305 Millstream Way.
The motion is to adopt. Mr. McElroy,
Yes.
Mr. Waltrip, Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Ms. Bowie.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Item number 3 is CBPA-24-0178 at 112 Sugar Bush for construction of a patio and walkway.
To the board, Henley Grogine, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 24-0178. Mr. Corey Bell of Williams Landscape and Design Incorporated has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Mr. Paul Koskek and Ms. Karen Savage for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the installation of a patio and walkway located at 112 Sugar Bush within the Fords Colony subdivision and the Powhatan Creek watershed. The parcel was platted in 1997 after the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 1990. The RPA affected this lot with the 2004 revisions to the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Area. Here you can see the Powhatan Creek watershed boundary outlined in yellow with the parcel in question outlined in blue. If we move further in, you can see the current aerial photography of the site along with the topography and RPA. As you can see, the entire property is within the resource protection area. The total lot size of this property is 1.18 acres, of which 100% is located within the RPA. The applicants are proposing to install a patio and walkway. A previous Ches Bay exception under CBPA 23-0167 was approved for the existing single-family dwelling. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 194 square feet of impervious impacts to the seaward 50-foot RPA buffer. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals half a planting unit or 6 shrubs. The applicants have submitted a mitigation plan equaling 7 canopy trees, 13 understory trees, and 113 shrubs, thus satisfying the county's mitigation requirements for CBPA 23-0167 and this current proposal. Any mitigation surety as a condition of approval will only pertain to the additional half a planting unit or 6 shrubs that is required. Staff are also requesting that an affidavit be recorded in the Williamsburg, James City County Courthouse due to the environmental sensitivity of this lot. As you can see, this is the previously approved site plan. The only thing that has changed with this current plan is the addition of a walkway and patio here, which you'll see shortly, and one of the approved BMPs is to be moved here along this berm. So as you can see, same layout, the proposed mitigations, plantings, and that proposed walkway and patio within the 50 seaward buffer outlined here. And then again, that berm that was previously approved along with one of the BMPs that was previously approved has been moved here. Just moving closer in, 2 of the BMPs, that one is to remain same as the previous proposal. And then again, we have that patio and walkway here coming off the stairs. And then if we're looking at the existing site, that staircase in question is located here, so it'll start here and come out. And if we move around, looking the other way, it'll be coming out this way. Again, off that staircase, coming this way with the patio being right around this area. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the installation of a patio and walkway. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of a patio and walkway are considered accessory in nature. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions outlined before you. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be minor for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval for this exception request, and if the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project, and the applicants must submit a surety of $500 in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plan equaling half a planting unit or 6 shrubs. An affidavit must be recorded in the Williamsburg, James City County Courthouse prior to the release of surety, and this exception request approval will become null and void if construction is not begun by January 9th of 2026, and written request for an extension to an exception must be submitted to the SRP division no later than November 28th, 2025, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Mitigation of 6 shrubs is far exceeded by what they're proposing, which is a good thing, but
Yes.
just what's the reason behind that?
So the current mitigation, that 6 shrubs, accounts for specifically the patio and walkway, but the plan brought to us also accounts for the previous mitigation requirements for the lot.
Thanks.
Further questions? Thank you, Ms. Gruden. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board?
Madam Chair, members of the board, my name is Nate Reams with Williams Landscape and Design, 1554 Penniman Road. I'm here to answer any questions you might have about the proposed project.
Questions for Mr. Reams?
It's just a paver walkway that's the same as the patio or different?
But
Is the paver patio, the walkway a paver walkway?
yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, it's pavers from the deck all the way going up to the small patio there.
Is this pervious or impervious pavers?
They're impervious pavers. Other questions?
So, thank you.
Thank y'all for your time.
With no further questions, I will close the public hearing. Oh, sorry.
I'm here to address some comments from an adjacent property owner, Mr. Kurt Detweiler at 108 Sugarbush. The landscape plan is discrepant with respect to the current Chesapeake Bay Board approved plot plan dated 1/2/2024. Landscape plan discrepancies to plot plan discrepancy 1. Landscape plan does not reflect or reference updated infiltration trench requirements to accommodate impervious patio and walkway surfaces. Specifically, impervious surface calculations on plot plan do not reflect inclusion of patio and walkway surfaces. Trench design and dimensions do not reflect additional impervious surfaces. Discrepancy number 2, landscape plan changes front yard grading, surface flow direction, and infiltration trench number 1 placement, specifically change from berm-directed surface flow gradient to east side yard infiltration trench 1, change to southeast front yard infiltration trench number 1, and inflow surface grading. Further comments, this change revisits past conversations and agreement. The original draft plot plan identified 3 infiltration trenches located on southeast, east, and northeast clearing edges. I expressed concerns regarding infiltration trench seepage, increasing surface water presence on the lower elevation corner of my yard. The resulting agreed solution reflected on January 2nd, 2024 plot plan included combining the southeast and east trenches, or 1 and 2, to a single larger trench on the east side yard and the creation of a berm to direct water flow into this trench. The resulting larger trench seepage would then flow directly into the lot rear and normal standing wetland areas. For some reason, this combined larger trench, trench number 1 on the January 2nd, 2024 plot plan, has been moved to the southeast front yard location of the structure on the landscape plan. This again raises concern of increased trench seepage causing standing water presence on my yard. I suspect the reason of the change is a result of the state of preliminary unfinished grading present on the site and accessibility/implementation issues between the structure and the clearing limits or silt barrier fence on the east side. Suggested resolution: the current clearing limit silt barrier fence is incorrectly located too near to the home structure east side per the January 2nd, 2024 plot plan measurement verified. If the clearing limit or silt fence is reviewed and modified to match the plot plan, an additional 10 feet of clearance can be realized, and the as-approved January 2nd, 2024 plot plan would still be viable with infiltration trench number 1 on the east side. Thank you.
My name's Nate Reams, Williams Landscapes and Design, 1554 Penniman Road. We're going to work with Land Tech and increase that size of the BMP to account for the additional water that's causing issues, it sounds like. But we'll be working with Land Tech to mitigate that issue, so it's no longer an issue.
Feel that by mitigating that and enlarging that area for the runoff, that will protect the next door neighbor's property?
Yes, I believe so. We'll be working with Land Tech, as everybody knows that they're do a lot of good work in this county, and I'm sure we'll figure out the 100-year floods and the calculations to handle all that water coming down into those
Needs to be done.
BMPs. Any other questions I can answer? Thank you.
Other questions? Any discussion? I'll close the public hearing.
Ms. Bowie, if staff could get clarification on the board's recommendation on this infiltration trench, which was originally here per the original approval that Mr. Detweiler was mentioning via Ms. Grogine, and it has been shifted here. That is, just wanted to point out, that is his objection to his feeling is this location will put more water on his property, which is down here on this on the screen. Just want to make sure that the location of that infiltration trench is addressed by the board at this meeting, whether it should be the original approved location or the modified revised location.
I have a question on, so that trench is moved uphill, right? Along the berm. What about where's that water going? That was going to be handled by that infiltration trench. Although some of it's being intercepted by the new location, but there's still water that's going to discharge that way.
Mr. McElroy, the original design as shown on the screen, the water was collected in this swale system and delivered to the infiltration here, and then discharged through the rear of the property, not affecting Mr. Detweiler's property. The revised location just shows a location. It doesn't show revised grading. If the grading's the same, then the location of the infiltration trench would be here within the swale system itself. Still treating this part of the project, but not treating any of this other water, which was a concern raised at the time.
And so moving the structure further towards the front of the house is the proposal, but in lieu of, or replacing the one that's there, what would be, why not two? Why not leave one and add one? A total of three.
That's,
That considered?
that's a question you need to ask the applicant. Staff's unprepared to answer that question. Also under consideration is increasing the size of this one to accommodate the additional impervious cover. Just want to make sure that was clear in the resolution.
You get a comment on whether it was, there was consideration for just adding one as opposed to moving one?
You come forward, please.
To be honest, I wasn't in that process, so I don't know what considerations were taken for that. To be honest, I'm filling in for someone that couldn't make it, so I'm kind of getting secondhand information. To be honest, I don't want to kind of mislead or say anything wrong.
Actually, what you're doing is just increasing the BMP pond area to hold more water, and it'll filter out the same ditch to the rear, to the right side, the rear property. You're maintaining everything except enlarging the BMP to accept more water so it doesn't run over on the next door neighbor until it has a chance to run off. Is that correct?
From what I understand, that's the goal, is to prevent the water from doing that. And I'm not 100% reason why they moved it, and I'm not 100% sure why that was moved. But yeah, I can't fully answer that question.
Thank
Is there an option of, if you were to leave the original proposal there and that infiltration trench number 2, the smaller one, if you were to increase the size of that for the patio, would that be a viable option to go with the original plan, but just bump the size up of trench number 2? Would that mitigate the concerns of the neighbor as far as flow?
Again, I'm not fully aware of the entire situation on that property. Like I said, I'm filling in. I wish I knew a little bit more on that. I just know that the clearing from the edge of the house to where they cleared out is only like 5 or 6 feet. And I'm not sure if that played into why that I guess infiltration trench number 1 got moved to the front yard. I wasn't sure.
The adjacent property owner that had the complaint or comment was this existing building in the lower right, correct? Right, okay. Well, the berm looks to be protecting, the berm and the infiltration trench seems to be protecting that property in that direction. Leaving the, I guess what I'm saying is leaving the infiltration trench number 1 where it was doesn't really address the adjacent property's owner's concern.
Don't have a whole lot of fall between the one that you want to take out down to the second one. So average rain, you're probably going to be in good shape. It's when you have a large downpour is when you're going to have your overflow onto the next property. And we never know when that's going to happen.
Correct. And knowing our area, we're prone to that.
Berm can't be built up at or towards the property, adjacent property, so that makes sure that that overflow goes to that second?
I believe so. I believe we probably could do something like that. We're making sure that berm is definitely tall enough to make sure, the 1,000-year flood, water's not going over that berm and into the neighbors.
I think you need to look into that scenario personally, instead of just adding another one, because your sheet flow is going to be a very shallow And if you get a lot of rain, it's just gonna flow over unless you've got something to hold it.
Yeah.
That's my take on it, for what it's worth.
What is the
that's-
current cross-section of that? Do we have a cross-section? How high is that berm now? How big is it now? One foot height. 100 foot long, 1 foot, off the, landscape architecture drawing, Williams drawing.
Are you aware of the adjacent property owner's concerns?
I was not. And I don't think we were, that was not brought to my attention before our meeting.
Would you consider a deferral on this to modify your plan? Concerns of the board or whatever?
I guess I was told to come and answer the questions for the patio. I don't know about the BMP stuff, so the paver patio and walkway, I thought that's what we're looking for that. But as far as the BMPs, we're gonna be working with Chase from Land Tech and that company to, make sure we accommodate the BMP size and making sure that, there's not any future issues with, water going into adjacent properties and such.
All right, thank you very much. So it appears the board has some reservations about the information that we have at this point in order to make a decision. Are you able to answer the question about the berm, the height of the berm? Ms. Gruging, you don't have that available? All right, thank you.
Seems like there's enough unknowns here that kind of give me pause, I guess, for making a decision on this myself. There seems to be a little bit more work that needs to be done to have a more, to kind of articulate a more specific plan. It seems like there's quite a bit of unknowns here, and then there's also the adjacent property owner has concerns that I would like to see mitigated.
We can't vote for a deferral, only the applicant. So if you feel like there's, a risk of just not being approved, it would behoove you to request a deferral.
But we'd like to ask for a 30-day deferral, if is that how I term that?
Yes, we can, the board can consider that. So the applicant is requesting a deferral to the February 2025 meeting. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I would make a motion to accept the deferral requests for case number CBPA-24-0178 at 112 Sugar Bush to the February 2025 meeting.
So motion is to defer to the February 2025 meeting. Mr. McElroy, Mr. Waltrip,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Ms. Bowie.
Yes.
Matter is deferred to the February meeting.
All right, thank you. We will next consider CBPA-24-0176, 104 Doral for construction of a deck. Ms. Gruging?
Board members, Emily Grosjean, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 24-0176. Mr. Chase Grogg of Land Tech Resources Incorporated has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Mr. James Wilson for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a deck and patio located at 104 Doral within the Ford's Colony subdivision and the Powhatan Creek watershed. The parcel was platted in 1999 prior to the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 1990. See the Powhatan Creek watershed boundary outlined in yellow before you, along with the subject parcel in blue. Moving further in on that parcel, the most recent aerial photography, along with topography and resource protection area, as well as the floodplain. There was a bit of a technical issue with GIS. This is actually a little bit further up on the property, which you'll see reflected in the site plan here shortly. The total lot size of this property is 0.70 acres, of which 61% is located within the RPA. The applicant is proposing the construction of a deck and patio in the rear of the proposed single-family dwelling. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 2,339 square feet of administrative impacts to the landward 50-foot RPA buffer, 304 square feet of legislative impacts to the landward 50-foot RPA buffer, with 2,643 square feet total impacts to the RPA buffer. The minimum first floor square footage required for a two-story in the section of Ford's Colony is 1,100 square feet. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals 6.5 planting units, or 6 canopy trees, 12 understory trees, and 24 shrubs. The applicant has provided a mitigation plan equaling 6.5 planting units in the form of 3 canopy trees, 4 understory trees, and 52 shrubs, thus satisfying county mitigation requirements. As you can see before you, the administratively approved single-family dwelling is outlined and hatched in gray here. And the proposed deck and patio before you is located right here in purple. Just for some clarification, if it's not obvious, the deck is a raised deck above a patio. The patio is within the same square footage as that deck. There's also some administratively approved riprap drainage related items, along with some select clearing for a sanitary sewer connection. The floodplain boundary has been marked in this blue line here as well, along with the wetlands in green. And this pale blue box here is just showing that 20-foot drainage and utility easement. As you can see, the proposed deck and patio is staying within that 50-foot landward RPA buffer. And then the same thing again, a little bit clearer, but with the addition of the proposed mitigation plantings outlined in green here. Some recent photography of the site, kind of going off this little stake here as the corner of the proposed administrative single-family dwelling. Moving to the right to give you an idea of where that proposed deck and patio will be located here, and then moving to the side of that more to give you an idea of the topography. Here's a shot kind of looking back up to the front of the property. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of a deck and patio. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of a deck and patio are considered accessory in nature. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions outlined before you. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be minor for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval for this exception request, and if the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. The applicant must submit a surety of $4,500 in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plan equaling 6 planting units or 3 canopy trees, 4 understory trees, and 52 shrubs. And this exception request approval will become null and void if construction is not begun by January 9th, 2026, and written request for an extension to an exception must be submitted to the SRP division no later than November 28th, 2025, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Just to be clear, the single-family dwelling is administratively approved.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And so all we're looking to approve is the addition of the deck.
Yes, sir, deck and patio.
Made a comment earlier about the minimum square footage being 1,100 square feet for a single. What was the rationale behind even mentioning that? What does that mean? What does that have to do with the deck?
just to try to keep some consistency across staff reports that pertain to homes in Ford's Colony, we want to make sure we're just including that for record's sake.
But you've already administratively approved this single-family dwelling though, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Questions? Scourging.
Good evening, members of the board, and Happy New Year. Chase Grog with Land Tech Resources, Inc., 205 Bullifonts Boulevard, Suite E, Williamsburg, Virginia, 23188. Thank you, Emily, for your presentation. Though this exception request for a proposed deck and patio below is pretty straightforward, I would like to point out a couple of items. As staff mentioned in their presentation, with the proposed disturbance being outside of the seaward 50 feet, except for a sewer lateral connection, the board's action this evening is for the proposed deck with patio below it on the rear of the house. In reviewing our site plan, you may have noticed that we do not have the house on the front setback of the property. This is due to the slope of the lot and the proposed garage being placed in the basement of the house. While trying to keep the house as far forward as possible, we also needed to obtain a drivable slope on the proposed driveway. Our decision to place the garage in the basement also allowed us to reduce the overall impervious cover of the lot. Looking at other proposed plans we have done, a standalone garage wing generates roughly 600 to 700 square feet of additional lot impervious coverage. The rock swale placed to the west of the house will help to eliminate erosion along with what would be a new grass swale. I flared it out at the end to help promote the channel flow to switch to sheet flow into the woods. Roughly the same is true on the eastern portion of the property. The driveway, there's a curb placed at the end of the driveway to catch the stormwater runoff and slow the water to the end of the driveway. The water then enters into an inlet in the driveway and out a pipe flared with a flared stone as well to promote sheet flow. Finally, mitigation has been provided for both this small amount of impervious as well as the administrative items. Based on the information I've provided and staff's recommendations for this case, myself and Mr. and Mrs. Wilson request approval for the minor proposed impacts. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Very much.
Would anyone else wish to address the board? That'll close the public hearing and consideration.
Madam Chair, I think this is a minor impact, and I would be in agreement with county staff's recommendation to approve it.
So a motion to adopt?
I was just making a comment, but unless
that's
somebody else,
just-
unless
all right,
somebody else
that
has
was not
a, unless anybody else has a comment, I will make a motion. I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board, case number CBPA -24-0176 at 104 Dorel.
Motion is to adopt. Mr. McElroy,
Yes.
Mr. Waltrip,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Ms. Bowie.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
We'll next consider CBPA-24-0156 at 111 Burnham for replacement and expansion of a patio.
Evening, Vice Chair, members of the board, Amanda Frazier, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 24-0156. Christy Bruning Custom Gardens has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Mr. Ralph and Miss Linda Malami for encroachments into the RPA buffer for a patio replacement and expansion located at 111 Burnham within the Ford's Colony subdivision in the Powhatan Creek watershed. The parcel was platted in 1988 prior to the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance. Here you can see the Powhatan Creek watershed boundary outlined in yellow and the subject parcel outlined in blue. A closer aerial photo of the subject parcel. Topography. RPA buffer. The total lot size of this property is 0.52 acres, of which 39% is located within the RPA. The applicants are proposing to replace and expand the existing patio at the rear of the home. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 190 square feet of increased impervious. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals half a planting unit. The applicants have provided a mitigation plan equaling 1.5 planting units, 18 shrubs, therefore exceeding county mitigation requirements. The areas grayed out and hatched are the existing impervious structures on the property. This blue area here is going to be the expansion. This section here is actually covered by this existing deck, and they are expanding the patio beneath this existing impervious. The increased area is going to be roughly in this area here that is currently mulched, and then it comes down a little bit beside the existing deck. As you can see here in green are the proposed mitigation plantings. Photo from this angle showing the work area, and another from this side. Again, it will be coming further down this direction and then expanding out into this mulched area. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the patio replacement and expansion. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of a patio is accessory in nature. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions which you have before you. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be minor for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval for this exception request, and if the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicants must obtain all necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. The applicants must submit a surety of $1,500 in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plantings equaling 18 shrubs. This exception request approval will become null and void if construction has not begun by January 9th, 2026, and written requests for an extension to an exception must be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than November 28th, 2025, 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
Questions for Ms. Frazier?
Like everything normal on this.
Pretty straightforward, though. The site plan shows the existing deck to be permeable. Is that
It
an
does.
error?
That's why I tried to gray it out a little bit to show
That's
that
already
it
there.
was existing, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone care to address the board about this matter?
Ralph Lamy, I'm the property owner, and just, if you have any questions.
Is your question answered
Yeah.
sufficiently? All right. Thank you, sir. There's no further discussion. I'll close the public hearing.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt a resolution to grant exception for Chesapeake Bay case number CBPA 24-0156 at 111 Burnham.
Motion is to adopt. Mr. McElroy,
Yes.
Mr. Waltrip,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Ms. Bowie.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Moving on to CBPA-24-0179 at 208 Montefiore for construction of a single-family dwelling and patio. Ms. Grogan.
Board members, Emily Grogin, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 24-0179. Mr. Chase Grogg of Land Tech Resources Incorporated has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Mr. Martin Mather of Omega Development LLC for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a single-family dwelling, deck, and patio located at 208 Montefieth within the Fords Colony subdivision in the Powhatan Creek watershed. You can see the subject parcel outlined in blue here, along with the Powhatan Creek watershed boundary outlined in yellow. Moving further in on that parcel, the most recent aerial photography, along with the existing topography and RPA buffer. The parcel was platted in 2001 prior to changes to the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 2004. The total lot size of this property is 0.51 acres, of which 95% is located within the RPA. The applicant is proposing the construction of a single-family dwelling with an attached deck and patio. A previous Ches Bay exception request under CBPA 21-0047 was approved on April 14th, 2021. This approval has since expired and is being brought before the board again. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 3,224 square feet within the 50-foot landward RPA, 1,009 square feet within the seaward 50-foot RPA, for a total of 4,233 square feet of impacts to the RPA buffer overall. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals 10.5 planting units, or 10 canopy trees, 20 understory trees, and 36 shrubs. The applicant has provided a mitigation plan equaling 12 planting units, or 4 canopy trees, 6 understory trees, and 104 shrubs, thus exceeding the county's mitigation requirements. Additionally, the applicant is proposing 2 bioretention stormwater best management practices, or BMPs, to manage drainage on the lot. Prior to the issuance of a final certificate of occupancy, the applicant must submit a letter of installation from a qualified professional to the SRP division. No surveyed as-built drawings are required, but this letter must verify compliance with all approved construction plans for stormwater BMP facilities. Staff are requesting that an affidavit be recorded in the Williamsburg-James City County Courthouse due to the environmental sensitivity of the lot. As you can see, the site plan is the exact one that was brought before the board in the prior Ches Bay approval. We have the proposed bioretention BMPs 1 and 2 outlined in pink here. The administratively approved portion of things outlined in gray, with the attached deck and patio and proposed portion of the home that encroaches within the 50-foot seaward portion is outlined in purple here. We have the wetlands here as well, along with the riprap for the drainage coming off that BMP here and here. And then the same image, just with the inclusion of the proposed mitigation plantings outlined in green. And then we have the BMP specifications and calculations as well. And some recent photography of the site. You can faintly make out a blue flag back here. I'm kind of going off that point with these photos here to show the approximate location of where that proposed deck and patio and portion of the single-family home will be located. Kind of looking from the side there, where that blue flag was further back in the previous photo, kind of coming from the side there to show you where everything will be going. And then just turning to the right from there, looking more uphill at where that patio corner will be. And then just a downhill shot uphill, just to give you an idea of the existing topography on the site from that location. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of a single-family dwelling, deck, and patio. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of a deck and patio are considered accessory in nature, and the proposed single-family dwelling extends into the seaward 50-foot RPA. The board may grant exceptions to sections 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions outlined before you. And staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be major for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval for this exception request, and if the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project, and the applicant must submit a surety of $6,000 in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plan equaling 12 planting units, or 4 canopy trees, 6 understory trees, and 104 shrubs, and the construction of 2 bioretention stormwater BMP facilities. An affidavit must be recorded in the Williamsburg-James City County Courthouse prior to the issuance of a building permit, and the applicant must submit a letter of installation from a qualified professional to the SRP division prior to the issuance of a final certificate of occupancy. This letter must verify compliance with all approved construction plans for stormwater BMP facilities. No surveyed as-built drawings are required, and this exception request approval will become null and void if construction has not begun by January 9th of 2026, and written requests for an extension to an exception must be submitted to the SRP division no later than November 28th of 2025, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Does the board have any questions for Ms. Groging? No.
How is this different than the one that was approved before?
There are no changes.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Groging. Thank you. Mr. Grog?
Good evening again. Chase Grog with Land Tech Resources Incorporated, 205 Bulliphants Boulevard, Suite E, Williamsburg, Virginia, 23188. Thank you, Emily, for your presentation. As mentioned by staff, this exact layout was previously heard before this board as CBPA 21-0047 at your April 14th, 2021 meeting and received a 5-0 approval vote. Though it has been a few years, I still remember the amount of work we put into this lot to get it to that board approval. We worked for a while with our client to get a house that would fit with the limitations of the lot. This is noticeable in both the garage and the left corner of the house and their position on the front setback. The final home design has a finished first floor square footage of 2,695 square feet, which is 695 square feet over the minimum for this section of Ford's Colony. This made us increase our proposed mitigation to one of the most planted and stormwater treated lots I have worked on. First, starting with the standard mitigation plants you see on all of the projects. This site requires 10.5 units to be planted, and we are proposing to plant 12 units. These units do not include the plants that will also be installed within the 2 proposed bioretention basins. The 2 proposed bioretention basins have been designed utilizing the Virginia runoff reduction method and will have close to 100% of the lot drainage collected by them. That is also the drainage that is both from within the RPA as well as outside of the RPA. By utilizing the VRRM spreadsheet, we ensure that the water leaving this site will either be no effect or better when it comes to nutrient loads. That is relative from the site's current site to when the project is constructed. When I describe these BMPs to clients and builders, I like to call them commercial grade BMPs. My point with that statement is the ones shown on this plan are designed the same way a commercial civil project would design them, thus meeting county stormwater quality requirements like a commercial project is required to. Finally, once the treated water leaves our site, it flows directly into JCC BMP PC 162 prior to entering into the resource. While the 2004 changes to the Chesapeake Bay Ordinance have caused this upstream BMP to become an RPA feature, it will serve as a great second treatment for the already treated stormwater leaving our site. I will also mention that an operation and maintenance documentation of the proposed BMPs will be provided to the owner and contractor. As we always try to do, this proposed house development has been designed with all JCC and Chesapeake Bay preservation criteria, and we have done our best to limit on-site impacts while also utilizing proposed on-site and downstream water quality features to limit overall project impacts. Based on the information provided, staff's recommendation, and previous 5-0 board approval, we request the board to grant approval again. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Questions for Mr. Grog, please.
Like you've covered the detail.
I do my best. It was fun going back and watching the video. It was a COVID video. 3 people here, 2 people on Zoom, and masks galore.
Like Groundhog Day?
Thank you very much.
Questions? Thank you, Mr. Grog. Would anyone else care to address the board at this time? Close the public hearing.
Go ahead and make the motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board case number CBPA 24-0179.
Motion is to adopt Mr. McElroy,
Yes.
Mr. Waltrip,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Ms. Bowie.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Our next matter is CBPA-24-0119 at 2536 Robert Fenton for construction of a path and patio. Ms. Frazier.
Good evening, Vice Chair, members of the board. Amanda Frazier, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 24-0119. Mr. Bruce and Miss Mary Jo Bailey have applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the installation of a patio and walkway located at 2536 Robert Fenton Road within the landfall at Jamestown subdivision and the Powhatan Creek watershed. The parcel was platted in 2002 prior to the revisions of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 2004. Here you can see the boundary of the Powhatan Creek watershed outlined in yellow and the subject parcel outlined in blue. There's a closer aerial photo of the subject parcel taken prior to the construction of the existing dwelling. Topography, RPA, natural open space easement, floodplain. The total lot size of this property is 0.93 acres, of which 72% is located within the RPA. A previous Chesapeake Bay exception request was administratively approved under CBPA 24-0137 for the installation of an access path and sightline. In November 2024, Stormwater and Resource Protection Division staff received an inquiry about the installation of a patio on this property without the submission of a Chesapeake Bay preservation exception request. The applicants are seeking an after-the-fact approval for the installation of a patio and walkway. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 288 square feet of new impervious to the landward 50 RPA. Due to this being an after-the-fact request, the mitigation is doubled. Thus, the required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals 1.5 planting units. The applicants have provided a mitigation equaling 1.5 planting units, 1 canopy tree, 3 understory trees, and 6 shrubs, therefore meeting county mitigation requirements. As you can see here, this is the access path that was administratively approved. Here's the RPA buffer, mitigation plantings in green, and this area here is the proposed patio and walkway. The section in purple would be within the RPA, and they're also proposing some stepping stones connecting the walkway to the access path. Here's some site photos taken. This is the walkway that was constructed without prior approval. And the patio will be going about here, and the RPA line runs roughly on this section of the patio. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the installation of a patio and walkway. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the installation of a patio and walkway is considered accessory in nature. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions, which you have before you. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be minor for the proposed development. If the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicants must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. The applicants must submit a surety of $1,500 in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plantings equaling 1 canopy tree, 3 understory trees, and 6 shrubs. This exception request approval will become null and void if construction has not begun by January 9th, 2026, and written requests for an extension for an exception request must be submitted to the Stormwater Resource Protection Division no later than November 28th, 2025, 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
Picture back up the work that's being done there. In other words, this was not approved, what I see there now?
Correct.
And you're trying to get this approved, after the fact?
Correct.
I understand. Okay. Is it, I wonder why putting the house there that this wasn't included. It looks like it's a new structure.
I don't believe it was included on the original site plan for the house and was requested after the structure had been built.
Project's at a halt right now until we approve it or whatever.
Correct.
Ms. Frazier, I have a question. On the site plan or site mitigation plan, not the photograph, there's a circle that says remove something, and I can't read that second word.
So this site plan has been modified. They had submitted a site plan requesting to remove that sapling prior.
It says sapling.
Yes.
Okay. right.
I do believe that is this tree right here, which is still standing. I would defer that to the applicant if that is different. But yeah, if you have any more questions.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That clarifies. Any further questions? Thank you, Ms. Frazier. If you care to address the board, please come forward.
Hi, I am Bruce Bailey, property owner. In answer to your question about, why the work started before it was approved, you moved the line on me. I had Land Tech do a site plan. I had the whole, as you can see, the house is there. I submitted for the access path and a sight line. And I don't know if you can't see it in this picture, but the sign that the county drove into the ground to represent the line, my path there is outside of it. So I did not for a minute think that my path was inside this sight line or inside the RPA. And anyway, so I guess somebody scaled the plat when a question was asked. A neighbor had asked a question, as I understand it, and the plat was scaled, and someone said that it didn't scale correctly, and so I had to pay to have someone come and redelineate the wetlands. They measured it off and determined that my patio was over the line. So I had no intent to do this without proper approval. And frankly speaking, having paid Land Tech to do the survey, I would have never in a million years expected that I would be standing here doing this. So anyways, needless to say, I am, and I'm happy to answer any questions about it. But I will also add that we are good stewards of this property. We paid extra money to have permeable pavers, even though I was outside the RPA. So all the pavers for this path and for the access path are permeable pavers. We paid a lot of attention to that. And the original tree removal thing, we did not do that. In fact, we relocated the access path so that we would not have to take down trees. So in my opinion, we've done everything above and beyond, but again, here I am. So anyways, I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have.
I think the board can realize that things like this do happen. I can understand that the over a little.
I apologize if, for any inconvenience this has
Appreciate you
caused.
coming up and explaining the situation. And
I appreciate your patience and your time. Happy to answer any other questions.
You may come forward.
Address. I just want to note that you see where the cross area is. We even made the path less than that, so we've taken off several feet from what you're stating. See where it
It's all
says?
good.
I know, but
There's
if they're going to say 8 inches here or there,
They're not.
anyway, we took off some so that we would even,
What she's saying is the path there where it shows the purple, it's actually just a little shorter than that. You can kind of
right
see
there.
it in
Yeah,
the picture.
That area where the X is,
But
the covered deck. in
We
front of the
still
covered
have
deck, there's
proposed the
that's
same
not
amount
there
of
anymore.
mitigation and, so it's all good. Not worried about it. I just want to,
I would like to put that.
actually, my landscape person wants to be able to finish it. It's basically where we are. Again, happy to answer any other questions.
Questions from the board? Thank you. Mr. Grog.
Good evening. Chase with Land Tech, 205 Bullfunds Boulevard, Sweetie, Williamsburg, Virginia. Wasn't really planning on saying anything, but the one I'll just speak real quick to in reference to the line. We're technically talking about two different lines behind this property. There is a conservation easement, which is why there's a sign behind the property, but the conservation easement that was platted way back when is now not the same as the RPA. So that's what unfortunately occurred here. Our site plan was showing the RPA per the GIS, current wetland delineation and everything caused a little bit of a mix up on the backside there. Thank you.
No further comment. I'll close the public hearing.
looks like they're doing a good job. Support the exception.
I have a motion.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to adopt a resolution to grant the exception request for the Chesapeake Bay Board case CBA 24-0119 at 2536 Robert Fenton.
Motion is to adopt. Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. May?
Yes.
Ms. Bowie?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
I believe there are some board considerations at this point.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. I do want to introduce two new members, two new alternates. One has sat up on the dais tonight, Mr. Mark McElroy. And then in the audience tonight is Mr. Matthew Woolsey, both recently appointed by the Board of Supervisors.
Welcome. Are there any matters of special privilege? None that I'm aware of. So with that, I suggest that we move to adjourn.
I would make a motion to adjourn, Madam Chair.
A voice vote, please. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. The meeting is adjourned.